Just a few minutes before the wedding, I overheard my future daughter-in-law coldly tell her best friend, "I'm going to file for divorce as soon as the inheritance is in my name." My son had absolutely no idea about his wife's true nature. I smiled slightly, and I began to set the trap that would leave her with nothing. The first thing I thought was, "I'm glad you're here. Stay until the end and tell me which city you are viewing my story from. I want to know how far it has reached." The St. Patrick's Church in Aspen, Colorado seemed to come alive. Voices were chatting and laughing, hurried footsteps, the sound of the staff arranging tables and chairs echoed throughout the courtyard. Today was the wedding of my son, Robert, to Candace Baker, the girl he loved with all his heart. I was in the middle of this lively atmosphere, checklist in hand, reviewing every detail with my eyes. The white floral wreaths at the church entrance had to be straight, the ribbons on the chairs perfectly aligned, the catering team ready. I wanted everything to be perfect, not only for Robert, but for me too. It was the first time I had seen him so happy, and I, a mother who had sacrificed her entire life for him, only wanted him to have an impeccable start. I walked around the courtyard, stopping to smell the intense aroma of the lilies, trying to keep calm. But in my mind, the uneasiness lingered. Candace was a beautiful, clever young woman, always smiling like a ray of sunshine. But there was something in her gaze, in the way she held Robert's hand, that sometimes I found hard to understand. I told myself maybe I was overreacting. Age had made me suspicious, pensive. I shook my head to ward off that premonition. After checking everything, I decided to stop by the bridal suite. Candace was standing in front of the mirror, in an immaculate white dress that hugged her slender figure. Marissa, her best friend and maid of honor, was carefully adjusting the long train of the dress that brushed the floor. Seeing her, I couldn't help but admire her. "You look gorgeous," I told her sincerely. "This dress is perfect on you." Candace turned, smiled radiantly, and thanked me with a sweet voice. But that smile, now that I think about it, was a little too perfect, as if rehearsed. I suggested she drink some water to stay hydrated and went out to find her a fresh bottle. It was hot that day, and I didn't want my son's bride to feel exhausted during her big moment. I walked down the hall and found a bottle in the prep room. Returning, I heard giggling coming from the bride's room. The door was ajar, just enough for Candace and Marissa's voices to escape. I was about to knock, but I stopped dead in my tracks when I heard Marissa ask in a curious tone, "Are you sure? She's going to sign, right?" My heart skipped a beat. She? Me? I stayed still, clutching the bottle, trying to listen better. Candace's voice sounded, cold as ice. "In a few days, I'm sure she'll hand me the pen. I'm going to file for divorce as soon as the inheritance is in my name. And when everything is done, I'm going to sell all the assets to pay off debts and disappear." I felt the blood stop circulating. The assets? Sell everything? Disappear? I was still trying to process when Marissa let out an amused laugh. "What if she changes her mind?" Candace replied with a tone so cunning it chilled me to the bone. "Then I'll invent any excuse to divorce him and find someone else. In the worst case, I'll get rid of Robert. He has no idea about anything." I stood there, paralyzed behind the door. My mind was spinning, as if the floor were sinking beneath my feet. Candace, the woman I thought was a blessing for my son, was planning to take everything that belonged to our family. Worse yet, she dared to suggest getting rid of Robert, my son, the being I had loved and protected all my life. I wanted to walk in, scream at her, ask her how she could be so cruel. But my legs were glued to the floor. I just kept listening. Candace continued, her voice light, as if telling something unimportant. "It's not the first time. I already did it in Phoenix. It's just a matter of knowing how to move the pieces. Phoenix? The first time? Had she done this before? I felt a sharp pain in my chest, as if someone were squeezing my heart. All the times Candace smiled at me, all the times she called me Mum, with that sweet voice, now appeared in my mind as a farce. I had trusted her. I had opened my heart to welcome her into the family, and yet she only saw us as prey. Suddenly I heard firm footsteps behind me. I was startled, my heart pounding so hard I felt it would burst out of my chest. I quickly turned around, walked to a corner of the hallway, and pretended to look intently at my phone. My hands were trembling. I almost dropped the water bottle. I glanced sideways and saw an employee pass by with a carefree expression. She didn't suspect a thing, just smiled at me and asked if I needed anything. I shook my head, forcing a no, thank you, while hearing my own voice tremble. I returned to the ballroom as if I had never heard Candace's poisonous words. But in my mind, every phrase of hers repeated itself again and again, like a knife cutting my heart. How could I remain calm knowing that my future daughter-in-law planned to take everything from me and even harm my son? The ceremony began. I stood next to Steve, my husband, in St. Patrick's Church. The light filtering through the stained glass windows fell upon Candace, giving her a sweet, almost saintly air. She walked arm in arm with Robert, with a radiant smile like the sunrise and bright eyes fixed on my son, as if the whole world belonged only to the two of them. Seeing the scene, my heart sank. If I hadn't heard the conversation earlier, maybe I would have cried with emotion for my son. But now, every gesture from Candace, every smile, gave me the chills. She acted too well, like a puppet moved by invisible hands. I squeezed Steve's hand harder, trying not to let him notice I was trembling with rage. The wedding proceeded solemnly. The priest pronounced the blessing, his voice echoing between the ancient stone walls. When Robert and Candace exchanged rings, applause filled the church. I applauded too, but I felt an enormous weight in my chest. I looked at Robert, smiling happily, without the slightest suspicion. I wanted to scream. I wanted to pull him away from her, but I couldn't. Not now. I needed time and proof to show who Candace really was. After the ceremony, everyone went out to the door, adorned with flowers, to take photos. I stayed next to Steve, smiling forcedly for the camera, while relatives from both sides praised me for how well everything had turned out. "Mary, it was gorgeous," a cousin told me, patting me on the shoulder. I felt grateful, but I didn't take my eyes off Candace. She was standing apart, whispering something to an unknown man in a grey suit. He was tall, thin, with salt and pepper hair and a cold gaze. They spoke quickly, and then Candace looked at me. I saw a flash of nervousness in her eyes before she hid it with a smile. I felt a jolt in my chest. Who was that man? What did he have to do with Candace's plan? A few minutes later, that man approached me. "Hello, Mrs. Mary," he said with a grave and courteous voice, accompanied by a slight smile. I nodded in response, trying to remain natural, but my mind was racing. I didn't remember seeing him before. Could he be a guest from the bride's family, or a friend of Candace's? I wanted to ask, but immediately the next group of photos called me, and Candace came back right away. She took Robert's arm and pretended to adjust his tie in front of the camera. That gesture, seen from afar, seemed so tender, so full of love, but I knew it was nothing more than an act. On the way to the Ritz-Carlton for the reception, we travelled together in the bridal car. Steve and I were in the front seat, while Robert and Candace were in the back. I heard Candace laugh softly and say something to Robert about the music choice for the first dance. Her voice was sweet, full of energy, but every word made my skin crawl. I turned my head, and through the rearview mirror, saw Candace leaning on Robert's shoulder, their hands intertwined. I wanted to scream, tell my son that she didn't deserve him, that she was deceiving him, but I stayed silent, squeezing Steve's hand, who continued to chat cheerfully with the driver about the first days of our marriage. The reception hall at the Ritz-Carlton was more majestic than I had imagined. Warm, golden light illuminated the tables covered with impeccable white linens, and in the center of each were large vases with fragrant lilies. Guests were taking their seats amid animated laughter and chatter. I walked around greeting old friends, receiving more than one compliment for the organization. "Mary, you made everything like a dream," a friend commented, raising her glass for a toast. I smiled and thanked her, but inside I felt heavy. If they knew what I had just overheard, would they still be enjoying themselves like this? Passing by the cocktail bar, I saw Candace next to Marissa and another woman, perhaps the Queen, her best friend. The three were chatting animatedly, but as soon as I approached, they fell silent. Candace looked at me and smiled enthusiastically. "Mom, the floral arrangements are beautiful. I'm sure it was a lot of work." I nodded and replied with a couple of dismissive phrases, but I noticed that Marissa and the Queen avoided looking at me. What did they know? Did they have something to do with Candace's plan? I felt like I was entering a maze where everyone was hiding something. The band started playing, and Robert led Candace to the dance floor for the first dance. I stayed watching, containing the pain. They looked like a perfect couple, Candace twirling in Robert's arms, the wedding dress gleaming under the lights. The guests applauded and cheered, but I only saw a performance. I went to the bar, where the light was dimmer, to regain my composure. There again, I saw the man in the grey suit. He was alone, with a glass of wine in his hand, looking towards the dance floor. I was about to approach him, but he just twisted a slight smile, put down the still full glass, and turned to leave. That gesture chilled my blood. What did he mean to tell me? I returned to the table and sat next to Alice, my youngest daughter. She was in her final year of law school, smarter and more perceptive than anyone else in the family. Alice leaned towards me and whispered, "Mum, I've noticed that Marissa and the Queen keep looking at you since the party started. They don't seem very comfortable." I nodded without saying anything, but I felt another piece of the puzzle fitting into place. Alice always detected the strange things. Maybe she had noticed something too. When the MC announced it was time to cut the cake, I glanced sideways at Candace. She was checking her phone under the table, very quickly, as if she didn't want anyone to see her. The screen light illuminated a phrase, "Only a few days left." I felt my heart tighten again. A few days for what? To get my signature? To sell all my family's properties? Candace put away her phone, took Robert's hand, and went up to the stage to cut the cake. She was smiling radiantly, hand in hand with my son, amid everyone's cheers. I watched the scene, but I no longer felt joy. Only suspicion, pain, and a determination that was growing inside me remained. I stayed silent, watching, memorizing every little detail from the morning. The man in the grey suit, Candace's restless gaze, the discomfort of Marissa and the Queen, the mysterious message. Everything seemed like pieces of a puzzle that I still couldn't understand, but I knew I had to discover the truth. The morning after the wedding, the atmosphere at the Ritz-Carlton still retained some of the euphoria of the day before, but for me, everything had changed. I went down to the lobby with a bundle of documents to review the payment for the rooms of the guests who had stayed. The aroma of morning coffee drifted from the reception, but my mood didn't relax. Candace's words from last night kept swirling in my head, like a nightmare that wouldn't dissipate. I repeated to myself that I had to remain calm, that I had to find a way to protect Robert, but every step I took felt heavy, as if I were carrying all the pain and distrust. At the reception, I ran into Marissa, maid of honor and close friend of Candace. She was handing over her room key, her face tired, dark circles under her eyes, and without the slightest trace of joy from someone who had just attended a high-profile wedding. I observed her, trying to read if there was anything unusual. Marissa didn't look at me. She just lowered her head and tangled her fingers in her purse strap. I approached and smiled softly. "Marissa, will you sit with me for a moment? Have a coffee to clear your head?" She looked up, a little surprised, and nodded reluctantly. We sat in a corner of the lounge, where soft light came in through the window. I ordered 2 cups of coffee, trying to make my voice sound as natural as possible. "Did you have a good time yesterday? At a wedding like that, you must be exhausted, right?" I asked, not taking my eyes off her face. Marissa took a sip and replied dryly, "Yes, very good. Everything was very nice." Her tone was dry, her gaze evasive, as if she feared I would discover something. I leaned in a little toward her and lowered my voice. "I saw a man in a grey suit yesterday. It seemed strange to me. Do you know him? Is he a friend of Candace's?" Marissa was startled, her hand trembled, and the coffee sloshed in the cup. "No, I don't know him. He must be a guest from the bride's side," she answered quickly, and immediately stood up. "Excuse me, I have to go get my things." I nodded with a smile, but deep down, I knew she was hiding something. When Marissa left, I looked towards the lobby door, just in time to see the Queen appear. She was wearing a light blue dress, her hair pulled back, but as soon as our eyes met, she turned around and left quickly. That gesture was too obvious, as if she feared I would confront her. I made the excuse that I had to answer a call and got up, although I really wanted to observe. From a corner of the lobby, I saw Marissa head directly towards the Queen in the outer courtyard. Their faces were tense as they whispered something. I couldn't hear, but my instinct told me they were worried and that I was the reason. I went out to the courtyard and took a deep breath of the fresh aspen air. The lake shone under the sun, but my heart was cloudy. Just then I saw Alice, my youngest daughter, talking to a wedding service employee. She signaled me to come closer with a look full of intention. "Mum, this boy told me something very interesting," Alice said in a low voice. The employee, a young man named Paul, looked around and then recounted. "Last night, while clearing the tables, I accidentally overheard the Queen talking to Marissa. She said, 'I hope Candace doesn't ruin everything this time like she did in Phoenix.' I don't know what else they said, but by the tone, they seemed very worried." I felt my heart pounding. Phoenix. Phoenix again. Candace's phrase from last night echoed in my head. This is not the first time. I already did it in Phoenix. Had she done something similar there? Deceive someone, take their assets, and then disappear? Alice looked at me without saying anything, but her eyes seemed to ask, "What do you think, Mum?" I took her arm and led her to a corner, whispering, "Honey, I think Candace is hiding something very big. I need you to help me." Alice nodded, her eyes lit up like a warrior ready for battle. She had always been perceptive, always able to see beyond the obvious. I felt a little relieved, but at the same time, the fear inside me grew. If Candace was as dangerous as I suspected, Robert, my son, was at risk. At noon, the family gathered to eat at a small restaurant by the lake in Aspen. The aroma of grilled fish and sauce was delicious, but I couldn't swallow anything. Candace was sitting opposite, diligently pouring wine for Steve and praising the place I had chosen. "Mom, this restaurant is perfect. Everything is delicious." She smiled with a cloying sweetness. but I only saw her fakery. Steve laughed loudly and patted me on the shoulder. Mary, see? We have a daughter-in-law who knows how to appreciate things. I nodded, forcing a smile, but inside I felt as if I had thorns. Every gesture of Candace's now aroused my distrust. When dessert was served, I saw Candace glance at her phone. She unlocked it quickly, read something, and immediately turned the screen away, as if she didn't want anyone to see it. Robert, sitting next to her, asked curiously, "Who texted you that you're smiling like that?" Candace replied immediately with a soft voice, "Oh, just a friend from far away congratulating us." But I didn't believe her. Her smile, the hurried way she put away her phone, everything seemed suspicious to me. I wanted to snatch the phone from her and read that message, but I restrained myself. I had to stay calm and gather more evidence. Returning to the hotel, as I crossed the hallway, I ran into the Queen. She smiled and wished me good night, with a sweet tone as if nothing were wrong. But passing by me, I heard her murmur, in a low voice but loud enough for me to hear, "You won't be able to stop it." I froze, feeling a chill run down my spine. What did the Queen know? Was she talking about me or Candace's plan? I wanted to call her and demand an explanation, but I knew doing so would only reveal my suspicions prematurely. I had to be patient, even if it was harder than I thought. That night, when the hotel lights dimmed, I called Alice to my room. With the door closed, I told her everything, from the conversation between Candace and Marissa to the man in the grey suit and the Queen's murmur. Alice remained silent, listening while taking quick notes in a notebook. "Mum, I'm going to start investigating Candace," she said with a firm voice. "Her finances, her past, anything to do with her. I'll ask my friends from college. Those who study law always have ways to find information." I looked at her with a mix of pride and sadness. Alice was barely over 20 years old. She should be enjoying her youth, not involved in all this. But I knew I needed her. "Thank you, honey," I said with a choked voice. "I just want to protect your brother, protect our family." Alice took my hand with a firm gaze. "Mum, I won't let her hurt Robert. I promise you." I nodded, holding back tears. But inside I was afraid that Candace was not just a scam artist, but a bigger threat than I thought. Afraid of not arriving in time to protect my son. I hugged Alice and whispered, "Be careful, honey. I don't want to lose both of you." She nodded, but I knew we were both entering a battle without yet knowing who the real enemy was. 2 days after the wedding, I was sitting in a small coffee shop near Alice's university, my heart restless like someone on the edge of a cliff. The place was small, smelling of freshly roasted coffee, but I couldn't enjoy it. Alice entered, with a thick folder in her hand and a more serious expression than ever. "Mum, I found some things," she said, placing the pile of papers on the table, in a low tone as if she feared someone would hear. I looked at her, feeling my heart pound hard. What I was about to hear could change everything, and I didn't know if I was ready. Alice opened the folder and pointed to each line printed in black and white. "Candace owes more than $600,000, Mum. She has 3 loans with private lenders and 2 with individuals. One of them is Victor, the man in the grey suit who was at the wedding." I took a deep breath, trying to keep calm. Victor, the man with the cold smile and the sharp gaze. He was part of Candace's plan, and now he had a name. But what Alice said next chilled my blood. "I also found information about Phoenix. Candace almost married a businessman from there, but the wedding was cancelled only 3 days before. The groom's family didn't say anything, but it's rumored that they lost a large amount of money from the company. No one could prove that Candace was involved. But think about it, Mum. Too much of a coincidence, don't you think?" I turned the pages with trembling hands. There was a loan in the name of Candace's mother, Mrs. Lopez, but the guarantor was Candace herself. It wasn't a small amount of money, and the deadline to pay it was about to expire. I looked at Alice with a choked voice. This girl, she's not just deceiving Robert. She's done this before, hasn't she? Alice nodded with a firm but worried look. I'm going to keep investigating, Mum. I have friends in Phoenix. They can find out more. But, Mum, I think we should be careful. Candace is not acting alone. I nodded, feeling a stone in my chest. Candace was not just an ambitious woman. She was a predator, and my family was her next prey. We left the coffee shop. I hugged Alice tightly before she got into her car to return to the university. Be careful, honey, I told her with a trembling voice. I don't want you to be in danger. Alice smiled, but I could see the tension in her eyes. Don't worry, Mum. I'm going to discover the truth. I watched her drive away, and I stood on the sidewalk, feeling a loneliness I had never experienced before. I had lived for more than half a century. I had faced many difficulties to build this family, but I had never felt as helpless as at that moment. In the afternoon, I returned home with a heavy heart. Robert was sitting in the living room reading the newspaper. I asked him, "Where is Candace, son?" He looked up and smiled slightly. She went out with Marissa. They probably went shopping. I nodded, but suspicion was already starting to grow in my head. Marissa, the friend who always avoided looking me in the eye. What were they doing? I made the excuse to go to the grocery store to buy ingredients for dinner, but I really wanted to breathe. I wanted to clear my mind. In the parking lot near the market, I suddenly saw Candace and Marissa next to a black SUV. Next to them was Victor, the man in the grey suit. He handed Candace a thick white envelope, his gaze alert, looking around. Candace took the envelope, quickly put it in her purse, and the three separated as if they feared being discovered. I turned the car around immediately, my heart pounding hard. What was in that envelope? Money? Documents? Or something more dangerous? I drove down another street so they wouldn't see me, but inside I knew I had just witnessed another piece of the plan. That night, the whole family gathered for dinner. Candace was cheerful, talking and laughing. Today I met a friend who works in investments. He told me there is a very promising opportunity, she commented, her eyes shining as if sharing great news. Steve nodded in approval. Very good, Candace. You are very active. Robert chose his wife well. Robert smiled, took Candace's hand, with a proud look. I watched the scene, but I couldn't swallow the food. Investment opportunity? I knew it was just an excuse, another part of her plan. I remained silent, pretending to eat, but a plan was starting to form in my head. The next morning I woke up with the feeling that the whole world was weighing on my shoulders. Sleep didn't relieve me. It only made the ideas about Candace clearer. I sat at the breakfast table, with a cold cup of coffee in my hands, looking out the window. It was a sunny day in Aspen, but my mood was dark. I knew I had to act. I couldn't wait for Candace to make the first move. I picked up the phone and called Jeff, an old friend who works in real estate in Denver. Jeff, do you know anything about a guy named Victor, who usually wears a grey suit, who lends money? I asked directly. Jeff was silent for a moment and then answered cautiously. Victor? That one is famous as Quick Collector in Colorado Springs. He lends at extremely high interest. He has no scruples. He's been in some trouble, but he's never been arrested. Mary, why are you asking about him? I just told him I needed to confirm something, then thanked him and hung up. My heart was pounding hard. Victor was not just a piece in Candace's plan, but he was more dangerous than I imagined. Jeff sent me Victor's number in a photo of his business card. I looked at the series of numbers, my finger hesitating over the screen. Call or not call? If I confronted Victor directly, would I put my family at risk? But then the image of Robert smiling happily next to Candace came to mind, mixed with her cold voice. If it gets complicated, we'll get rid of Robert. I squeezed the phone tightly, took a deep breath, and dialed. Hello, Mr. Victor, I said when his grave voice answered. This is Mary, Robert's mother. I want to see you. Today, at the coffee shop on Elm Street in Colorado Springs. Does 3 o'clock in the afternoon work for you? He was silent for a second, and then replied calmly, That's fine, Mrs. Mary. I'll be there. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I entered the small coffee shop on Elm Street. The intense aroma of coffee and the soft guitar music couldn't calm the storm inside me. Victor arrived punctually, in a white shirt and a black leather briefcase in his hand. He was tall, thin, with salt and pepper hair and a gaze as sharp as a knife. We sat in a secluded corner and ordered 2 black coffees. I didn't want to prolong it. I went straight to the point. You are collecting a debt from Candace Baker, right? Victor frowned a little, and then smiled reluctantly, as if he already knew what I was going to ask. I thought you didn't care, he said with a grave voice. But yes, she owes me a large amount, and the final deadline is this weekend. On the day of the wedding, I approached her to greet her on purpose to scare her. His words chilled me, so his action that day hadn't been casual. He was playing some kind of game, and Candace was part of it. I looked him straight in the eye and told him firmly, I have a deal. I will help you recover your money, but you must keep the pressure on Candace at a moderate level, just enough to make her nervous, but without touching her. Victor crossed his arms, tilted his head, and observed me intently. And why do you need me to do that? He asked curiously. I replied, trying to keep my voice serene. I need her to make a mistake on her own. When I have enough proof, I will pay you the rest of the debt. Victor remained silent, looking at me as if evaluating whether he could trust me. Then he nodded. Agreed, I accept. But Mrs. Mary, I don't like to wait long. Before leaving the coffee shop, Victor added something that left me cold. You know, I had planned to do business with your husband, Steve, a big real estate project in Colorado Springs. But Candace got involved. She offered him a loan opportunity with high interest. After that, he withdrew from my plan. I suppose you didn't know this. I felt the blood rush to my head. Steve, my husband. Had Candace already approached Steve before, and I had no idea? I didn't answer. I just picked up the business card Victor left on the table, my hand trembling. Thank you for coming, I said dryly, and got up to leave. But inside, I felt torn in two. Not just Robert, but Steve too had been manipulated by Candace. I had trusted her, I had welcomed her into my family, and yet she had been stabbing us in the back for some time. Arriving home, I found Alice waiting in the living room. She had come to visit me, but I knew she was also worried like me. I took her to my room, locked the door, and told her everything. From the meeting with Victor to what he revealed to me about Steve. Alice listened with wide eyes and then nodded. Mum, she is more dangerous than we think. I'm going to prepare a recording kit and small cameras just in case. If Candace acts, we must have proof. I looked at her, feeling both pride and sadness. Alice was still young. She should be worried about her studies and her friends, not involved in this. Be careful, honey, I said with a choked voice. I don't want you to get involved. Alice took my hand and smiled. Mum, I'm your daughter. I won't let her win. Sitting in the room, I looked out the window as the sunset covered Aspen with a soft orange hue, but my heart was not calm. I thought about Steve, the man with whom I had overcome so many difficulties to build this hotel. He might be naive, trusting, but why didn't he tell me about that loan? Was he hiding something else from me? And Robert, my son, was still blindly in love with Candace, without imagining that she planned to destroy our family. I covered my face with my hands, feeling helplessness invade me. I've lived for more than 60 years. I've faced many trials, but I've never felt as defenseless as now. I just want to protect my family, but every step I take is like treading on a minefield. That afternoon, soft golden light covered the living room of my house, where the whole family was gathered. I was sitting in the old armchair, my hands tightly clasped, trying to keep my voice as calm as possible. Steve was in front of me, skimming the newspaper as he did every day, while Robert and Candace sat together on the sofa, their hands clasped and Robert's gaze full of love for his wife. I took a deep breath and spoke in a measured tone, as if I were just making random conversation. I think it's time for me to rest a little. I'm getting old, and this hotel needs someone younger to manage it. Robert, how about I transfer a part of the administration to you? Candace immediately raised her head, her eyes shining and a wide smile as if she had won the lottery. Really, Mom? Oh, you really think about our future? Her voice sounded enthusiastic, but I caught a glimpse of greed in her eyes. Robert just smiled slightly and nodded. Thank you, Mum, but take your time. I'm not in a hurry. He had always been like that, with no ambitions beyond family happiness. I looked at him with a sharp pain in my chest. If he knew what his wife was planning, could he still be smiling like that? I pretended to think, and then, as if by accident, I added, "Oh, if my daughter-in-law appeared as a co-owner, it would also be practical. Robert travels a lot for work, and with Candace in charge alongside me, I would be calmer." I glanced sideways at Candace and saw her straighten up, smiling even more. "If you trust me, I'll do everything possible," she replied in a voice sweet as honey. But I knew it was the voice of a snake stalking its prey. Steve nodded and patted me on the shoulder. "Good idea, Mary. Candace is dynamic. She would surely do well." Robert looked at his wife with pride. I smiled, but inside I felt a cold chill. The first hook was cast, and I knew Candace was about to bite it. Right after the conversation, I received a message from Alice. She had secretly installed an application to back up messages from Robert's phone when she borrowed her brother's cell phone to take wedding photos. Alice wrote, "Mum, Candace just texted Robert asking him to help her convince you to sign the transfer papers soon. She also told him, this opportunity cannot be missed." I read the message and gripped the phone tightly. Everything was going as I had predicted. Candace couldn't wait any longer. Her ambition had made her show her true colours, but I still needed to stay calm, let her fall into the trap herself. That night, I made the excuse that I had to go to Colorado Springs to visit some friends, left the house, and left Candace in charge of coordinating the hotel staff for 2 days. "Get used to the work," I told her gently. "I trust you." Candace nodded, smiling radiantly. "I won't let you down." But the way she looked at me, that gleam in her eyes, made me shudder. I knew she was thinking about the filing cabinet in my office, where I kept the documents for the family properties. The next day, Alice called me with an urgent voice. "Mum, a hotel employee just told me. Today Candace secretly entered your office, opened the filing cabinet, and took photos of some documents. She thinks no one saw her, but Rose from the cleaning crew saw it clearly." I felt my heart pound hard. Candace had already started to act. I told Alice, "Keep watching her, but don't let her suspect anything. I want her to think she's winning." I hung up and sat down, feeling the world spin around me. I had cast the bait, and Candace had bitten it. But why did I still feel afraid? Afraid of not being fast enough, smart enough to face her. That afternoon, I received a message from Victor. She already started asking me how to do the asset transfer. It looks like she's ready. I read the message and felt a chill in my chest. Victor was fulfilling the agreement, maintaining pressure on Candace. But I couldn't stop thinking about what he had told me the day before. Candace had gotten involved in Steve's business and had dragged him into a loan with extremely high interest. Steve, the man I had loved and trusted for decades, had hidden it from me. I wanted to ask him, to know why he didn't tell me anything, but I knew it wasn't the time. First, I had to focus on Candace. At the end of the day, I returned home trying to keep a serene face. On the front porch, I saw Candace conversing with Marissa, chatting animatedly like two carefree friends. But as soon as I appeared, Candace immediately changed the subject and turned to me to ask about the cake order for the hotel conference next week. "Mum, I think we should choose key lime pie. The customers will love it," she said with a radiant smile, as if she had nothing to hide. I nodded and replied, "Good idea, you decide." But inside I knew very well that she was trying to distract me. I smiled, but I didn't take my eyes off her. The hook had already been bitten, and I wasn't going to let her escape. The next morning, the light of dawn filtered through the curtains, illuminating the wooden floor of my room. I had barely finished preparing my coffee when I heard a knock on the door. Robert was there, his eyes a little red, as if he hadn't slept well. "Mum, I have something to talk to you about," he said with a hesitant voice. I invited him in, sat down, and tried to stay calm, even though I was agitated inside. "Candace says you should sign the transfer of part of the properties soon," he continued, wringing his hands. "She says that if her name appears, it will be easier for us to attract investment to expand the hotel." I looked at him and felt a sharp pain in my heart. Robert still blindly trusted Candace. He kept looking at her with those eyes full of love. I pretended to think about it, nodding. "I'll consider it, son. It's an important matter. I need to consult with a lawyer first." Robert sighed, clearly disappointed, but didn't argue. "Yes, I understand," he said before getting up and leaving. Looking at his back as he walked away, I wanted to call him, tell him everything, but I knew it wasn't the time. If I spoke without proof, Robert would think I was just jealous of his wife. At noon, I was at the living room window looking towards the balcony. Candace and Robert were there, under the shade of the small olive tree. She leaned her head on his shoulder, stroking his arm, whispering something to him. I couldn't hear it, but the way she tilted her head and smiled sweetly gave me a chill. She was manipulating my son, little by little, like a spider weaving its web around its prey. I clenched my fists, holding back the rising anger. I've lived for over 55 years. I've seen all kinds of people, but I've never met anyone so fake. Candace not only wanted the assets, she also wanted Robert's trust and love, only to destroy everything later. That afternoon, Alice called with an urgent voice. "Mum, I just spoke to Victor. He told me that Candace called him this morning and said, 'I'll have her signature in a few days. She is very sure of herself.'" I felt my heart race. Candace was moving faster than I imagined. "Take good care of yourself," I asked Alice, with a trembling voice. "I don't want you to take risks. Install more recorders in the office and in my room, but don't let anyone know." Alice replied with a firm voice. "Mum, don't worry, I know how to do it." I hung up the phone and sat down in the chair, feeling as if the whole world was crushing me. Alice was young but stronger than I thought. I felt proud, but it also hurt me. She should be worried about her final exams, not involved in this. That night, I was in my room when Candace knocked on the door. She was carrying a bottle of expensive wine and a radiant smile like a light. "Mum, I want to invite you for a drink," she said with a sweet voice, "to celebrate a new beginning for our family." I smiled and invited her in, although inside I only wanted to kick her out of the house. We sat down, I poured the wine, and tried to remain natural, but I noticed her gaze drifting towards the desk, where I had deliberately left some folders with property documents. She thought I didn't know, but I was already prepared. "How are you? I'm sure managing the hotel these days has been tiring," I asked with a soft voice. Candace smiled and replied, "Yes, a little busy, but I like it. Do you want me to help you more?" I nodded, but inside I felt an intense cold. Help. She only wanted to keep everything. When I pretended to get up to answer a call, I looked through the crack of the door. Candace immediately got up and opened one of the folders. She took out her phone and photographed every page, with quick and sure movements, as if she had done it many times. The mini camera that Alice had placed on the shelf surely recorded everything. I was in the hallway, my heart pounding hard, between rage and fear. She was too bold, too confident, but that very confidence would make her fall into the trap. Candace left, leaving the bottle of wine on the table. "I hope to be able to help you with the family responsibilities soon," she said, with the same perfect smile. I nodded and replied, "I hope so too, honey." But when the door closed, I slumped into the chair, my hands trembling. I had already seen her act. I already had proof. But why did I still feel restless? Maybe because my family, the people I loved the most, were on the verge of breaking, and I was the only one who could prevent it. The next morning, I woke up with the feeling that someone was squeezing my heart. The sun in Aspen streamed through the window, but it couldn't dispel the cold inside me. I went out to the porch and opened the mailbox, as I did every day. A white envelope was alone inside, with no sender or address. I opened it with somewhat trembling hands and saw a small piece of paper with a carelessly handwritten phrase. "They are watching you." My heart pounded hard, as if it were going to explode. Who had sent that? Candace? Victor? Or someone else I didn't know yet? I looked around, feeling as if invisible eyes were observing me from somewhere. I put the paper in my pocket and decided not to tell anyone, but my mind was already reviewing handwriting traces, trying to remember if they resembled someone I had seen before. At noon, Alice called me to a quiet corner of the hotel. She handed me her phone, her eyes full of concern. "Mum, I saw a video from the camera in Candace's private room," she whispered. I looked at the screen and saw Candace sitting at the table, with a pen identical to the one I use. She was practicing my signature, Mary Herrera, on a pile of blank sheets, repeating each stroke over and over carefully like an artist. I felt the blood freeze. She was preparing to forge my signature, to keep everything Steve and I had built. "She truly has no conscience," I murmured with a trembling voice. Alice took my hand, her gaze firm. "Mum, we almost have all the proof. She's not going to escape." But looking at her, I only felt pain. Alice was young. She should be thinking about her studies, about falling in love, not getting involved in this dangerous game. At the same time, my phone vibrated. It was Robert. His voice sounded confused on the other end of the line. "Mum, do you really want to put the properties in Candace's name? She insists. She says it's to facilitate the work, but I think it's a bit rushed." I felt a pang in my chest listening to him. Robert, my son, was still under Candace's manipulation, but this time I perceived a slight doubt in his tone. "Why do you ask?" I replied, trying to stay calm. "Candace keeps saying it. That if you agree, we should do it soon, Robert answered with a hesitant voice. I took a deep breath and told him, I'm thinking about it, son. This can't be rushed. Calm down. Leave it to me. I hung up, but I was left with a feeling of heaviness in my heart. Robert was starting to doubt, but would he have enough strength to face the truth about the woman he loved? That night, I met Robert at a small coffee shop near the pier in Aspen. I asked him to make an excuse so Candace wouldn't find out, fearing she would try to prevent it. The place was empty. Only the gentle sound of waves hitting the shore and the aroma of coffee floating in the air could be heard. Robert arrived in a simple shirt, but his face was tense and his eyes were red, as if he had been crying. I took his hand, speaking softly. Robert, I need to talk to you about something important. Then I showed him the proof Alice had gathered. Photos of Candace receiving an envelope from Victor, a video in which she photographed property documents, and a recording of her conversation with Marissa before the wedding. I told him everything, from the day I accidentally overheard Candace's plan to what Alice had discovered about her past in Phoenix. Robert remained silent, gripping the phone, his face changing from red to white. I saw his eyes moisten, as if he were holding back tears. It can't be, he murmured with a broken voice. Candace wouldn't do that. Mum, are you sure? I squeezed his hand, my voice choked. I didn't want to believe it either, son, but I can't let her hurt you or our family. He lowered his head, silent for a long time, until he said, I need time to process all this. Seeing him like that, I only wanted to hug him and ease his pain, but I knew this truth was necessary, even if it hurt. When I got home, the phone vibrated again. It was a message from Victor. She's starting to worry because you haven't signed. She will act soon. I read it, feeling like I was taking another step into a dangerous zone. Candace was losing patience, and that could make her more reckless. I replied to Victor, keep pressuring her, but don't overdo it. Then I sat there, looking out the window, trying to breathe to calm myself. Every step of this plan was like a card game, and I couldn't lose. I thought about the note I found in the mailbox that morning. They are watching you. Did Candace already suspect me? Or was there another person in the shadows, observing everything? On Monday morning, the sunlight streamed through my office window, but the air felt as cold as my insides. Sitting behind the desk, I held a carefully prepared packet of documents, trying to maintain a serene face. When Robert and Candace entered, I smiled and invited both of them to sit down. I have some papers I want you to review, I said softly, as if it were just a casual chat. I slid a limited authorization towards Candace and explained, this is a power of attorney, so you can sign some minor service contracts for the hotel on my behalf. I think it's a good way for you to start getting familiar with the work. Candace took the paper, quickly scanned the lines, and smiled as if she had found a treasure. Thank you very much, Mum, she said sweetly, and signed immediately without asking any questions. I looked at Robert and saw him sitting there, pensive. After what I told him the night before, I knew he was still stunned, unable to believe that the woman he loved could have planned something like that. When Candace finished signing, I noticed her gaze shift towards the locked cabinet in the corner of the room where I keep the main file of the family assets. That look was quick, but enough for me to see the hint of greed. She thought she had won, but in reality, she had just entered the trap I had set for her. I smiled, said a couple of phrases to continue the chat, and let them both leave. When the door closed, I slumped into the chair, my hands trembling. I was walking a tightrope, and every step was like walking on a wire. If Candace discovered that I knew about her plan, what would she do? I remembered what she had said. In the worst case, I'll get rid of Robert. I felt a sharp pain in my chest. No, I wouldn't let her lay a finger on my son. In the afternoon, the phone vibrated. A message from Victor. She still hasn't paid the debt. I'm going to push harder. I read the message with a sinking feeling in my stomach. Victor was doing what was agreed, but I couldn't help but worry. He was a loan shark, not someone I could fully trust. I replied, "Do as we said, but don't overdo it." Then I stayed there, looking out the window, trying to breathe to calm down. Every step of this plan was like a game of poker, and I couldn't lose. At the end of the afternoon, I drove to the grocery store to buy some things for dinner, but really it was to escape the feeling of being trapped. Just as I parked near the market, I saw Candace and Marissa sitting in a small coffee shop by the street. They were conversing with tense faces. Suddenly, Victor appeared. He walked straight to their table and sat down with a severe gesture. I quickly found a table 2 rows away, hidden behind a column, pretending to read the menu. Victor's voice resonated, loud and threatening. "I'm not going to wait any longer, Candace. You know what the deadline is." Marissa got up and went out to take a call, leaving Candace and Victor alone. I strained my ears and managed to hear Candace's voice, confident but with a touch of worry. "I just need a few more signatures and I'll have all the assets. She just transferred a part to me. She's getting old. It's easy to fool her." I clenched my fist, my nails digging into my palm. Easy to fool? Was it that easy she thought it would be to catch me? Victor left with a quick step, while Candace stayed, constantly typing on her phone, her face tense. I got up and left the place before she saw me, my heart racing. Candace was confident, but she didn't know that I had already listened, that I had already seen. She thought she was about to win, but in reality, she was digging her own grave. That night, while preparing dinner, Robert entered the kitchen with a hesitant voice. "Mum, Candace proposed to me to transfer a part of the company's account. She says it's a good investment opportunity, but I'm not sure." I stopped, looked at him, and saw an internal struggle in his eyes. "Don't worry, son," I said, trying to sound gentle. "Tomorrow I'll prepare the necessary documents. Leave it to me." Robert nodded, although I noticed he was still restless. I wanted to hug him, tell him I would protect him, but I knew it wasn't time yet to show all my cards. After dinner, Alice secretly looked for me in my room. She whispered to me, "Mum, I just installed another secret camera in the corner of the office and an alarm device connected to the safe. If Candace opens it, we'll know instantly." I nodded, took her hand. "Very good, honey, but you must be careful. I don't want you to be in danger." Alice smiled, but I could see the tension in her eyes. "Mum, everything will be fine. We almost caught her." I hugged her, feeling both pride and sadness. The next morning, I left the house early with the excuse of attending a reunion of former classmates in Colorado Springs. The sky in Aspen was still beautiful. The sunlight filtered softly through the branches, but I felt my heart heavy as if carrying a rock. I knew today was the decisive day, the day the trap I had set would close. Before leaving, I sent a message to Alice. "Stay alert. Stay. If anything strange happens, let me know immediately." She replied briefly, "Don't worry, Mum. I'm ready." I drove towards my destination, but my mind remained at the hotel, where Candace was digging her own grave. Almost at noon, my phone vibrated. Alice wrote, "Mum, the safe alarm was activated." My heart started pounding hard. I opened the camera application Alice had installed and watched live what was happening in the office. Candace, in a simple white shirt, was standing in front of the safe. She opened it and took out a package of property documents and the false power of attorney that I had deliberately left there. She sat down at the desk, picked up the pen she had practiced with, and signed Mary Herrera on the papers with a concentrated expression. I felt my blood boil. She truly thought she could keep everything, that I was an old woman easy to fool. Without stopping, Candace picked up her phone and called a bank employee. "Hello, this is Candace, representative of Mrs. Mary Herrera. I need to transfer $120,000 from the company account to my personal account. The power of attorney is already signed. I'll send it right now." Her voice was calm and confident, as if everything was under control. I squeezed the phone in my hand, holding back the rage. It was time for her to fall into the trap. As soon as Candace hung up, the door burst open. A team of police officers, whom I had previously contacted, entered. The commanding officer, tall and with a firm voice, said, "Candace Baker, you are under arrest for breach of trust and large-scale fraud." Candace jumped up, her face pale, but trying to remain calm. "You're mistaken. This is an agreement approved by Mrs. Mary. I have the power of attorney," she said with a trembling voice, pointing to the papers on the desk. The officer shook his head and showed a folder. "We have all the proof. The video of you forging the signature, the recording of your conversation with Marissa before the wedding, and the images receiving an envelope from Victor." I walked into the room, and when Candace saw me, I noticed true panic in her eyes for the first time. You knew from the beginning," she murmured with a broken voice. I stared at her and replied coldly, "Candace, did you think it was that easy to fool me? I've been watching you since the day I overheard your plan. You wanted to steal my family's assets. You wanted to hurt my son. But you were wrong." Candace opened her mouth to say something, but the officer signaled, and the agents escorted her out. They handcuffed her, and even so she kept looking back, with a mixture of rage and desperation in her gaze. Robert was standing in the corner of the room, silent from the beginning. When they took Candace away, the boy turned to me, his eyes filled with pain. "Mum, why did she do that?" His voice broke, like a child who had just lost something most valuable. I approached him, took my son's hand, but didn't know what to say. I just hugged him, feeling every shudder in his body. "I'm sorry, Robert," I whispered. "I just wanted to protect you." He didn't say anything. He just lowered his head, and I knew his heart was broken. At the police station, Marissa and the Queen were also summoned. Under the pressure of the evidence, both confessed that Candace had promised them a share if the plan succeeded. Marissa, pale as paper, murmured, "We just followed Candace's instructions. She said everything would go well." The Queen lowered her gaze, not daring to look at me. Victor, called to testify, confirmed that Candace had deceived him in a false business deal related to Steve. "She's a professional," Victor said bitterly. "I was her victim too." I listened to him and felt a chill in my chest. Candace hadn't just deceived my family, she had hurt many more people. At nightfall, Candace was transferred to the detention center to await trial. Sitting in the car, I looked out the window and saw the street vendors illuminated with yellow lights, a warm light that couldn't calm me. Alice, sitting next to me, took my hand. "It's all over, Mum," she said softly. "You can finally be at peace." I nodded, but my heart was still heavy. Peaceful? I wasn't sure. I had defeated Candace, but the price was the wound in Robert's heart, the broken trust within my family. I entered the hotel lobby, where the soft melody of a guitar continued to play from a corner. This hotel, the project that Steve and I had built, was still standing. but I knew the cracks in my family would need time to close. I sat down on the sofa, looked around, trying to find peace again, but it didn't come. I only felt tired, as if I had just emerged from a long battle. A few days later, when I thought everything had calmed down, a white envelope appeared in my mailbox, with no sender, no address. I opened it, with trembling hands, and read the handwritten phrase, "Candace didn't do this alone. The other one is still in your house." I felt my heart stop. I looked around. I thought about Steve, the husband I loved but who hid debts from me. I thought about Robert, my son who was still struggling with the pain of betrayal. I thought about the family dinners, the shared laughter. And now I wondered, which of them was hiding something? I thought I had won, that I had protected my family, but now I understood that there was another calculating person sitting at my table. The story we tell is fictional, but it is based on some real events. The names and places have been changed to protect the identity of those involved. We are not telling this to judge, but with the hope that someone listens and stops to think, how many mothers are suffering in silence inside their own homes? I'm truly curious. If you were in my shoes, what would you do? Would you choose to remain silent to keep the peace? Or would you dare to face everything to reclaim your voice? I want to know what you think, because every story is a candle that can light the way for someone else. God always blesses, and I firmly believe that courage leads us to better days. Meanwhile, on the final screen, I leave you two of the channel's most beloved stories. I assure you they will surprise you. Thank you for staying until the end.